He looked me dead in the eyes and tossed my food into the trash like I was filth. No hesitation, no shame. Just a cold flick of his wrist and the sound of ceramic scraping metal. I stood there, hands still damp from washing dishes, heart pounding, louder than the silence that followed. My name is Emily. I'm 29. A quiet nutritionist who once believed love could be enough to earn a place in someone's home. I moved in with my husband Ethan's family after my mom passed, thinking it would be temporary. Just until we found our own footing. I thought if I contributed, cooked, stayed out of the way, things would eventually feel like family. Instead, every meal I prepared was met with quiet disgust. Every smile I offered was returned with empty glances. Rachel, Ethan's sister, never lifted a finger. Yet she was adored, celebrated, while I was invisible. Or worse, disposable. But it wasn't until today, when my father-in-law dumped my food out like garbage, that I saw it. The way Cheryl, my mother-in-law, watched, not shocked, not angry, but calm, almost satisfied. That was the moment something shifted inside me. I would no longer be silent. Comment if someone close to you ever made you feel invisible. And subscribe to see how I turned that pain into purpose. I was born in a house that didn't have much, but it had everything that mattered. My mom, Lorraine, was a nurse who worked nights and came home every morning with tired eyes and open arms. We didn't have a dining table, just a small counter where she and I would sit, eat, and talk about our day. She taught me early that food wasn't just about nourishment. It was memory. It was care. It was love on a plate. I learned to chop vegetables before I learned to ride a bike. Stirring soup beside her became our daily ritual. No matter how tired she was, she always smiled when we cooked. There was no dad in the picture. He left before I could remember his face. But my mom never made his absence feel like a wound. She filled our world with warmth and dignity. We had secondhand clothes, but everything was clean. We didn't go on vacations, but we had bedtime stories, Friday pancakes, and a garden of basilan tomatoes that she swore could heal a broken heart. In school, I was the quiet kid. Not shy, just observant. I noticed things other kids didn't. I noticed how teachers praised the loud students, how boys ignored the girl who brought leftover soup instead of pizza. I noticed how invisible people like my mom could become. Despite doing everything right, she never demanded attention. She just gave and gave and gave. I thought that's what strength looked like. That's what I wanted to be. By the time I turned 18, Mom's health had begun to falter. She was diagnosed with early-stage ovarian cancer. I was supposed to start college that fall, major in dietetics. I deferred for a semester to help her recover from surgery. That semester turned into a year, then another. She never asked me to stay. I chose to. Watching her shrink into hospital gowns while still trying to comfort me made it impossible to leave. We made peace with it. I got certified online, started freelancing nutrition plans from our living room. Life was quieter, but still full of purpose. When I met Ethan, I wasn't looking for love. He was a client first. I helped him after a knee injury, and we connected over shared playlists and bad puns. He was patient, attentive, gentle in a way that felt different. He brought groceries when I was too tired, helped with Mom's appointments, and never made him feel like a burden. For the first time, I felt seen. When Mom's condition worsened, he was the one who held my hand in the ICU. After she passed, the silence in our home became unbearable. Ethan suggested I move in with his family, just for a little while, he said, until we figure things out. The first time I walked into his childhood home, I knew I didn't belong. It was beautiful, pristine, curated, like a showpiece. Every room had expensive furniture, polished surfaces, no sign of daily life. His mother, Cheryl, greeted me with a stiff smile. She complimented my dress, then asked if I had a job outside of hobbies. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. His father, Gerald, shook my hand, like I was applying for a position he had already decided I was unqualified for. Then there was Rachel. Younger than Ethan, taller than me, always perfectly dressed. She breezed into the room like she owned it. She called me M without permission, eyed my thrifted clothes, and asked if I cooked actual meals or just salad bowls. It was the first of many little jabs, all wrapped in sugar. I told myself they were just adjusting to someone new. I smiled. I thanked them. I offered to help with dinner. Cheryl handed me a dish towel. At night, in the room Ethan and I shared, I stared at the ceiling wondering if I had made a mistake, but I reminded myself that family takes time, that love softens hard edges. I kept showing up. I cooked, cleaned, stayed out of their way. I wanted to be useful, to be seen as more than just Ethan's quiet wife. But no matter what I did, Rachel always shone brighter. She didn't work, but she always had new clothes, spa appointments, gifts arriving at the door. Cheryl beamed when Rachel walked in. Gerald poured her wine. Ethan, too, softened in her presence. One evening, I overheard Cheryl on the phone saying, "Rachel was always meant for more. Emily's sweet, but she doesn't know how to carry herself." It hit me like a stone to the chest. I hadn't been building a place in this family. I had been tolerated, at best. Still, I tried. I made meals with care. I decorated for holidays. I offered to tutor Rachel when she said she wanted to try a health influencer path. She laughed and said, "You think I want to do what you do?" Then she patted my shoulder, as if to say, "Nice try." The final confirmation came one afternoon when Cheryl introduced me to a family friend as Ethan's wife. She works from home, something with smoothies. I had poured my heart into my business, but to them, it was just noise. I wasn't Rachel. I wasn't their pride. I was a shadow in their curated home. Still, I clung to hope. I told myself that if I kept loving, if I stayed steady, they'd come around. But I had misunderstood the game I was in. This wasn't a family waiting to open their hearts. This was a house with a hierarchy, and I had entered at the bottom. Rachel always knew how to walk into a room and make it hers. It wasn't about beauty, though she had that too. It was about confidence built from decades of being told the world would always adjust to her. From the moment I moved in, it was clear she was the sun in this family's sky, and everyone else revolved around her orbit, especially Cheryl. I noticed it in the smallest details. If Rachel so much as mentioned craving something sweet, Cheryl would appear minutes later with a tray of warm pastries. If Rachel wanted silence, Gerald would lower the volume of his own football game. If I, on the other hand, asked for anything, like a quiet space to work, I was met with polite nods that led to nothing. She wasn't just adored. She was weaponized. Every time I did something right, it was matched with mastery of how Rachel had done it better. When I brought home a new client, Cheryl smiled and said, "Rachel's about to pitch to a Fortune 500 company." When I was featured in a small wellness blog, Gerald scoffed and pulled out a magazine Rachel had been photographed in, even though it was just a background appearance at a gala. Every small win of mine became an excuse to elevate her and diminish me. And she didn't even need to try. She simply existed, and the world clapped. Rachel had never held a job longer than a season. First it was real estate, then fashion blogging, then a brief stint in social media consulting. Each time, Gerald financed her projects without hesitation. He turned his firm's conference room into her startup space, even paid influencers to mention her new ventures. When one idea flopped, the next came with more fanfare. Failure wasn't failure for Rachel. It was just part of her journey. Meanwhile, I built everything with duct tape and late nights. I registered my nutrition business on my own. did my own branding, took client calls from a corner of the guest room while Rachel did facials and browsed boutique sites. I designed meal plans for people with autoimmune diseases and food sensitivities. I actually helped people, but Cheryl once said, "Rachel inspires. That's a gift, Emily. Not everyone has it." She said it with a soft smile, like she was complimenting me too. But it was a knife, slow, quiet, and deliberate. The imbalance deepened after Rachel's engagement fell apart. She came home in tears, dragging luxury suitcases and drama behind her. Cheryl pulled her into her arms, whispering that she was too good for him anyway. Gerald canceled a business trip to be home that weekend. I cooked dinner that night, hoping to help. Rachel didn't say thank you. Instead, she looked at the roasted chicken I had spent 2 hours on and asked if we had any vegan options. She had suddenly decided she wanted to detox from toxic male energy. Gerald chuckled and ordered takeout. After that, Rachel moved into the upstairs bedroom, the one I had been using for Zoom meetings and meal prep videos. Cheryl didn't ask. She simply said, "It makes more sense. Rachel needs space." Ethan didn't protest. He just said we'd figure something out. I ended up using the laundry room corner for my work setup. Rachel started inviting her friends over more often. They laughed in the living room, leaving smoothie glasses on coasters I had made myself. They never greeted me, never acknowledged my presence. She also began showing sudden interest in nutrition. At first, I was hopeful. She asked about smoothie recipes and macro balance. I gave her my guides, explained caloric density, offered to share my templates. She smiled, scribbled notes, complimented my work. For one fleeting moment, I believed a bridge was forming. But weeks later, I found her filming a TikTok series in the garden, using my exact scripts, word for word. She had changed the title to Rachel's Reset and erased every trace of where it had come from. I confronted her gently. "Hey, I noticed you used some of my notes. Could we collaborate more formally?" She laughed. "Oh, I didn't think you'd mind. You're more the behind-the-scenes type anyway." That night at dinner, Cheryl raised a toast to Rachel's ambitious new journey in wellness. I sat across from them, clutching my glass so tight my knuckles ached. Ethan smiled at his sister and said, "Proud of you, Rach." Not a single word for me. The silence around my contributions became deafening. I stopped bringing up my clients. I stopped mentioning progress. Every room echoed with Rachel's newest success. Her following grew online, largely because of my recipes and plans, but no one said a word. Cheryl called her our little influencer. Gerald started bringing her into business meetings, introducing her to people as our future brand partner. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to find Gerald praising Rachel's new protein bar idea. "It's brilliant," he said. "You've got a real business brain." She had gotten the idea from a recipe I had been testing for weeks. When I mentioned it, Rachel blinked innocently. "Oh, did you invent protein bars now?" Gerald laughed harder than he needed to. Even Ethan began to shift. He came home later, more distracted. When I shared my day, he nodded absently, eyes on his phone. But when Rachel walked into the room, he lit up. He said she was just going through a lot and needed the family. I wanted to scream, but I swallowed it. The moment that gutted me came on a Friday evening. Cheryl had organized a small party for Rachel's new brand launch. I had spent the entire day in the kitchen helping with food. Uncredited, of course. When guests arrived, Rachel wore a dress I had once saved up for but couldn't afford. She smiled under fairy lights as everyone toasted her vision. Then, right in front of me, Gerald handed her a check, seed funding for her next big leap. My legs went numb. Ethan put an arm around me, saying, "Isn't she incredible?" I nodded, feeling every inch of my silence crawl up my throat. In that moment, I understood. This wasn't just favoritism. This was systematic erasure. Rachel didn't just rise. She was lifted, on the backs of others, on mine. And I was expected to applaud. It was supposed to be a quiet celebration, just Ethan and me, 2 years married, no big gestures. I knew his family didn't like displays, unless Rachel was the center. But I had planned something small, meaningful. I spent the afternoon preparing a dinner with the recipes my mom had passed down: seared salmon with lemon dill, roasted potatoes, and her special honey-glazed carrots. I even baked a chocolate tart. From scratch, the one Ethan once said reminded him of our first date. I lit candles, set the table with fresh flowers from the garden, and wore the soft blue dress he always complimented. For once, I wanted to feel like I belonged in my own home. Ethan came home late. He walked in already distracted, talking into his Bluetooth headset, gesturing to someone I couldn't see. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and said, "Babe, sorry, I forgot to tell you, we have dinner reservations." I blinked, confused. Reservations? I thought we were... He held up a finger, still on the call. Then Rachel entered the room, dressed in a silk blouse and heels, laughing with Cheryl. "Is she ready?" she asked, tossing her curls like she was the star of the evening. Cheryl smiled. "Of course. We're going to Le Pavillon, family celebration, family." But not me. I looked at Ethan, searching for some kind of correction, some acknowledgement that he remembered. But he just muttered, "It's a last-minute thing. Business stuff for Rachel. You understand, right?" Before I could answer, they were already walking out the door. Gerald paused, glanced at my table, and muttered, "Bit much, isn't it?" Then they were gone. I stood there, the candle flames flickering in the silence, the food cooling minute by minute. I didn't cry at first. I sat down at the table and tried to eat, but every bite turned to ash in my mouth. I stared across from me at the empty seat, at the plate I had arranged with care. Slowly, I reached for the wine and poured myself a glass. The clink of glass against ceramic was the only sound in the room. The house, soofan filled with Rachel's laughter and Cheryl's orchestrated praise, was now so quiet it hurt. Later that night, I went to clear the dishes. I carried the tart back to the kitchen, untouched. As I opened the fridge, I heard something upstairs. Voices. I paused, the tart still in my hands. The door to Cheryl's study was slightly ajar. I moved closer, steps silent, breath held. Rachel's voice drifted down, clear and sharp. She actually thought he'd choose her over a brand deal. That's adorable. Cheryl laughed. She's trying so hard to matter. She doesn't realize she's background noise. Then came the worst, part Ethan's voice. "Let her play house. It keeps her occupied." I didn't drop the tart. I placed it carefully on the counter, like muscle memory had taken over, like I didn't want to disturb their cruel little theater. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the reflection in the window. My own face, pale, stunned, foreign. The words echoed over and over. Background noise. Playhouse. I felt myself split in two. The woman who cooked with love, and the ghost they had turned her into. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay on my side of the bed, listening to Ethan's slow breathing, feeling the weight of his betrayal press down like a second body in the room. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the candlelit table, the empty chair, the smirk on Rachel's face. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he misunderstood. Maybe he didn't mean it like that. But deep down, I knew. That moment at dinner, when he looked past me, that wasn't forgetfulness. That was choice. The next morning, I woke up early. I went downstairs, made coffee, and opened my journal. The one I hadn't touched since my mother's funeral. My hands shook, but I forced the pen to move. I wrote, "This is not a misunderstanding. This is a pattern." The ink bled a little, but I didn't stop. I wrote every word I remembered from the conversation upstairs, every dismissive glance, every stolen moment. I wrote until the page was full, and still it didn't feel like enough. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I went into the guest room, turned on my camera, and started recording. No script, no filter, just my face, raw, and my voice, steady. I said, "Today I realized I've been erased, not in anger, but in design. And I'm done pretending not to see it." I didn't know what I would do with the video, but I knew I had to start speaking again, even if no one else was listening. After that night, everything began to taste different. Conversations, glances, even the air in the house. It was no longer just cold, it was poisoned. I became hyper-aware of every shift, every whisper that ended when I entered the room. The walls of that house, once just indifferent, now felt like they were leaning in to listen to my breath. Still, I said nothing. I moved through each day with a calmness so rehearsed it could have fooled a stranger. But inside, I was unraveling. Char. First signs were small. Cheryl began asking pointed questions at breakfast, always with a smile. "Did you double-check those grocery charges, Emily? I just noticed a few strange totals." I kept receipts for every item, every cent. I always had. I handed them to her without emotion, but her eyes held something colder than suspicion. They held strategy. The next week, she claimed some ingredients had gone missing. The quinoa, the organic flaxseed. Did you already use them all? I knew I hadn't. I searched the pantry for an hour, heart sinking, until I found the bags emptied and crumpled in the bottom of the trash. Rachel walked by just then and shrugged. "Must have been the cleaning staff. You know how careless they are." Then came the financial tensions. Ethan started asking about our joint account, not with curiosity, but with implication. "You've been ordering more lately, right? Maybe ease up a little." I pulled up the statements. Almost all the charges were household needs, Rachel's. Supplements. Cheryl's almond flour that I had to special order. When I pointed it out, Ethan mumbled something about appearances and responsibility, then left the room. I wasn't imagining it anymore. I was being set up to look irresponsible, untrustworthy, a liability. I kept my work going in that cramped laundry corner, laptop balanced on a folding table, noise-canceling headphones barely muting the chaos upstairs. Rachel had turned the upstairs room into her content space. Ring lights, microphones, daily filming schedules. I heard her through the vents, parroting advice I had once given her. She didn't even change the phrases. Hydration before, caffeine. Color equals nutrients. My voice, my research, delivered from her mouth to thousands of eager followers. And when I raised it with Ethan, his reply cut deeper than anything before. "Babe, she's making it work. You should be proud. She's actually doing something with the ideas. I stopped cooking for the house. I said it was because I needed to focus on work." Cheryl nodded, said nothing. That night, I found my personal meal container, clearly labeled, dumped into the sink, half-eaten and soggy. A passive-aggressive gesture, just like the way my favorite mug disappeared. Just like the way the Wi-Fi in my corner slowed every time Rachel uploaded. These weren't accidents. They were messages. One day, Cheryl asked me to help clean the office downstairs. I hesitated but agreed. While dusting the drawer handles, I noticed an envelope marked Rachel Wellness LLC. I paused. Inside were documents, business registration, content outlines, product plans, my guide structure, my recipes, my layout. Everything I had shown Rachel during those early conversations, when I still believed she respected me. And at the bottom of the file was a signed partnership agreement between Rachel and a supplement brand I had once pitched to, and been rejected by. My name wasn't mentioned once. My hands trembled as I closed the drawer. I wanted to scream, but I walked out of that office, up the stairs, and into the guest bathroom. I locked the door and sat on the floor until the tremors passed. Then I called the company using the number listed on their website. I asked, pretending to be a potential client, whether Rachel developed her formulas herself. "Oh yes," the rep said cheerfully. She said it's all based on her years of experience helping her sister-in-law get healthy. Sister-in-law, not even a partner, just the backdrop of her origin story. I was reduced to a narrative device in a brand I built. When I confronted Ethan, he looked at me with tired eyes. "Why are you always assuming the worst? Maybe you should talk to Rachel directly." But I knew that wasn't the solution. Talking to Rachel was like speaking into a fog machine. You'd just end up coughing while she smiled and walked through untouched. Instead, I spoke to a lawyer. A quiet, unpaid consultation through a nonprofit legal clinic. I mailed them the screenshots, the timestamps, my original documents, and the video files proving my work came first. The young paralegal on the call looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in weeks. Respect. Then came the worst blow. One morning, I woke to a text from Ethan. "We need to talk tonight." Simple. Cold. I spent the whole day waiting, chest tight. That evening, he came home, sat on the edge of the bed, and said, "I think it's time we take some space." He had been thinking about it for a while. That I seemed unhappy. That I was letting resentment affect everything. He said he was going to stay at a friend's place for a while. I didn't cry. I just nodded. And when he left, I sat alone, surrounded by boxes of my life's work. Work that had been mined, repackaged, and sold without me. I realized then that the betrayal wasn't coming. It had already happened. Quietly, thoroughly, like a house, eaten from the inside by termites. And I had been standing in the ruins, calling it shelter. It was a Wednesday morning when everything cracked wide open. I hadn't slept the night before. Thebes felt too big without Ethan, the silence too heavy without even the sound of his footsteps. I sat on the edge of the mattress, scrolling, aimlessly, when a notification popped up from a private Instagram account I didn't recognize. The message read, "Thought you should see this. Not everyone here's blind." Attached was a link. I hesitated, then tapped. It was a promotional video. Rachel standing in the backyard, dressed in neutral tones, speaking directly to the camera. I created this system after helping a close family member who struggled with nutrition and emotional fatigue. She didn't know how to care for herself, so I stepped in. I rebuilt her habits from the ground up. Then the shot changed to a photo of me, blurred slightly, chopping vegetables in the same kitchen I had stood in day after day. My hands, my food, my background, no credit, no name, just stolen. I didn't feel rage right away. I felt cold, numb, like the air had been vacuumed from the room. I watched it again, then a third time. Each word she spoke, each lie that dripped from her mouth, chipped away at something I had been holding on to. The last bit of belief that maybe, just maybe, I was misreading it all. But there it was. Proof. Public. Polished. Undeniable. I stood up and walked downstairs, barefoot, not caring about the chill in the tile. Cheryl and Gerald were in the kitchen. Cheryl was flipping through a design magazine while Gerald stirred coffee. I placed my phone on the counter between them, hit play, watched their faces. Cheryl's didn't move. Gerald flinched, once, barely. When it ended, I looked at them both. My voice didn't shake. She used my work, my image, without consent. Cheryl finally blinked. "You should be flattered. The exposure helps everyone." I laughed, just once. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "Flattered," I repeated. "You think this is exposure?" Gerald leaned back against the counter, arms folded. "Rachel made it marketable. That's what matters." I looked between them, the taste of something bitter rising in my throat. "You knew. You watched me build it, day by day. You sat through my exhaustion, my effort, and you let her take it. She elevated it, Cheryl said coolly. You have passion, Emily, but Rachel has presence. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure, deliberate and practiced. I felt the tears coming, but I pushed them back. Not now, not in front of them. I turned, walked back upstairs, and opened every drawer I had been too afraid to empty. Clothes, notebooks, chargers, my life, my truth. I packed it all in silence, except for the sound of my heartbeat roaring in my ears. Then Rachel came home. I was halfway down the stairs with my suitcase when she walked through the front door. Sunglasses on, phone in hand. She looked at me and tilted her head. Going somewhere? I dropped the bag onto the last step, walked up to her. I saw your video. She smiled. Which one? There's a lot. The one where you turned my work into your platform. Her expression didn't change. She looked bored. Are you seriously still clinging to that stuff? You're good with ideas. I'm good with people. That's just how it works. I took a step closer. No. What works is honesty, credit, integrity. You sound emotional. I am, I said, but that doesn't make me wrong. She rolled her eyes and started walking past me, muttering, No wonder Ethan left. That did it. I spun around. You think you won? You think turning a family into your stage makes you strong? She stopped, back still turned. You needed me to be small, quiet, erased, but I'm not anymore. She looked over her shoulder, smirking. Sure, Emily. Keep dreaming. I met her eyes, and for the first time, I didn't look away. I already started. I picked up my bag and walked out the door. My heart was breaking, but my spine had never felt straighter. The first night away from that house, I stayed in the back room of a friend's one-bedroom apartment. It smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner, and the floor creaked with every step. There was no closet, just a few hooks nailed into the wall. I laid my suitcase on the floor and didn't unpack. I was too exhausted to cry, too full of adrenaline to sleep. I curled up on a thin mattress with my coat still on, staring at the water-stained ceiling, wondering how I had become so disposable to people who once called me family. In the morning, I woke up disoriented, my body aching in places I didn't know could ache. My phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. Hope you're okay. This is probably for the best. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a line that made my hands go cold. I didn't reply. For the first week, I drifted between my friend's apartment and a nearby library where I could get free Wi-Fi. My online presence had been nearly wiped out. When I searched my own business name, Rachel Wellness now dominated the results. All the SEO I had carefully built over 2 years was gone. My name was nowhere. I tried reaching out to former clients. Some responded with concern. Others were confused. They thought Rachel and I had been working together. One said, She said you were her assistant before she branched out solo. Assistant. I stared at that word for a long time before deleting the message. Money dried up quickly. The consulting work stopped the moment I lost visibility. I tried applying for short-term gigs online, but every rejection felt like another thread snapping loose. I took a job at a nearby grocery store just to afford food and keep my phone on, stocking shelves, sweeping floors, cleaning spills in aisle 5. At night, I'd return to the tiny room, eat instant noodles, and write in my journal, just to keep from disappearing completely. Sleep became a stranger. I'd lie awake, replaying every moment, every missed sign. I remembered Cheryl pulling Rachel closer during dinners, the way Ethan never stood up for me, Gerald's cold chuckles, the locked fridge. All of it had been building, step by step, and I had walked right into it. Some nights, I'd dream I was still in the house, still trying to be good enough, still setting a table no one would sit at. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, gasping, gripping the edge of the mattress like it was the only solid thing left in the world. One afternoon, while stalking a shelf of canned beans, I fainted. The floor was cold. I remember the sound of someone calling my name. Not my real name, just, "Hey, miss." I came to in the manager's office with a wet cloth on my forehead and a woman kneeling beside me. Her name was Lila. She was a part-time cashier who had noticed I hadn't eaten all day. "You've been burning at both ends," she said gently. "That's how fires die, you know." Her kindness cracked something in me. For the first time in weeks, I let the tears fall. Big, silent ones that soaked my shirt and made my breath hitch. She didn't say anything more. She just sat with me while I cried. After that, things shifted. Lila started checking in more. She shared her sandwiches during breaks. She told me about a nonprofit in the neighborhood that offered free therapy for women in crisis. I didn't want to go at first. I told myself I was fine, but I wasn't. So I went. The intake counselor asked, "What brings you in today?" And I said, "I lost myself." She smiled softly. "Then let's find her." Week by week, I started unpacking the weight I had carried. I spoke about my mother, about the way food had once meant love. I spoke about the betrayal, the erasure, the manipulation. My therapist helped me understand that what happened to me wasn't just unkind, it was calculated. A form of emotional abuse wrapped in etiquette and tradition. She told me something I've never forgotten. Abuse isn't always yelling and fists. Sometimes it's silence, expectation, and the theft of credit. But the wound is the same. The validation gave me fuel. I began building again, slower, quieter this time, but with more intention. I created a new email, a new domain, a new identity. I didn't call it a comeback. I called it reclamation. I wrote blog posts about healing through food, about the relationship between grief and nourishment. I didn't use filters. I didn't chase numbers. I just wrote, honestly. Slowly, comments started to appear, messages from women who saw themselves in my story, who had been silenced in kitchens and boardrooms and bedrooms, who had cooked with love and been served indifference in return. I was still broke, still tired. But for the first time, I felt full. One night, I came home to find a small package outside the door. No return label. Inside was a simple card that read, "You didn't deserve it. I see you. Keep going." No name, just that. I held the card to my chest and wept. I didn't know it yet, but the tide was starting to turn. A few weeks later, I got an email from a small women's health magazine asking to interview me about emotional nutrition. They had read one of my anonymous posts. I said yes. I didn't mention Rachel. I didn't need to. I had learned something powerful. Revenge was never the goal. Survival was. And healing? That was the revolution. But even as I healed, I knew this wasn't over. I knew there would come a time to speak, to confront, to lay the truth bare. Not to hurt them, but to finally be heard. It took me 4 tries to send the message. I wrote it, deleted it, rewrote it. Each version was colder, sharper, more detached, but none of them felt true. In the end, I sent just this. "Cheryl, I'd like to speak. Just us. One time, you choose the place." She responded 2 days later with a time and location. No pleasantries, no curiosity, just a pinned address to a quiet cafe on the edge of town. The kind of place with brick walls and low lighting where people meet to say things they don't want overheard. I wore black slacks and a navy blouse, not to impress, but to armor myself. As I walked to the cafe, my hands trembled inside my coat pockets. But my pace never slowed. She was already there when I arrived. Sitting upright, legs crossed, sipping tea with a calmness so composed it almost looked staged. Her pearl earrings glinted in the sunlight that cut across the window. When she saw me, she didn't smile, just tilted her head and gestured to the seat across from her, like a manager calling in an employee for review. I sat down. We didn't speak at first. The silence stretched between us like a thread being pulled tight. Then she broke it. "I'm glad you reached out," she said, folding her hands neatly. "Closure is important." Closure. I let that word sit between us for a moment, like it belonged to her. Like this was her story to close. "This isn't for closure," I said. "This is for truth." She didn't flinch, but her eyes narrowed slightly. I leaned forward, voice even. "You lied to me. For months. You watched me build something, and you stood by while your daughter dismantled it piece by piece." Cheryl sighed, as if I were being dramatic. "You were always so fragile about credit. Family doesn't keep score, Emily." I no longer needed their acknowledgement. I had given it to myself. Healing didn't start with a breakthrough. It began in the smallest, most ordinary moments, the way I flinched when someone raised their voice, or how I apologized for taking up space on a bus bench. My therapist, a calm-eyed woman named Carla, noticed it first. "You apologize for existing," she said during our second session. "Even your silence is shaped like a question mark." I didn't know how to respond, so I nodded and cried. Each week, I peeled back another layer. We talked about grief, about my mother's death, about how I'd transferred my sense of home, from her to Ethan's family, hoping someone, anyone, would offer that kind of warmth again. We talked about gaslighting, about power dynamics hidden in politeness, and the sharp cruelty of being overlooked again and again until you start to believe you were born to be invisible. Carla didn't offer cheap comfort. She offered clarity. She helped me understand that what I endured wasn't weakness. It was survival under quiet warfare. I wasn't broken. I was exhausted. And exhaustion can be healed. At the same time, I began making small changes to my daily life. I created a corner in my apartment just for me, a secondhand desk, a corkboard, a thrifted lamp. I printed out kind emails I received from readers and pinned them up, not for ego, for grounding, proof that I mattered, that my words mattered, that someone, somewhere, had been moved by something I had made. Lila, the cashier who had once shared a sandwich with me after I fainted, became my first real friend since the collapse. She invited me to a community wellness group at a local women's center. I hesitated at first. The idea of being around people again made my chest tighten. But I went. Just once. I sat in the back, barely spoke. But I listened. There were women from every walk of life, survivors of financial abuse, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse. Women who had been told they were too loud or too soft, too much or not enough. They spoke about the slow burn of betrayal, the pain of being useful but not loved. And I saw myself in all of them. So I kept going. Eventually, I led a session about food and emotional nourishment. I brought in simple meals, the kind my mother taught me to make. Hearty soups, roasted, vegetables, lemon water with ginger. I didn't lecture, I shared. I told them how food had once been my language of love, then became a weapon against me, and finally, slowly, was becoming my medicine again. The room was quiet when I finished. Then one woman stood up and whispered, "You just told my whole life. Story without knowing me." That was the first time I felt purpose without performance. Healing not as revenge, but as restoration. Meanwhile, Nourish from Within began to take root. I launched a weekly newsletter. Simple recipes, gentle reflections. No pressure to buy, share, or subscribe. Just a space where women could read something, honest and feel seen. The list grew steadily. Not viral, but real. One day, I got a message from Miriam, a retired chef who had followed my journey quietly. She had owned a wellness cafe before retiring and wanted to mentor women in food-based healing. We met at a farmer's market, and from the first hug, I felt safety radiate off her. She didn't care about branding. She cared about integrity, about impact. She told me my palate was gifted and offered to work with me on expanding my recipes into healing workshops. Under her guidance, I began building something more intentional. We hosted Saturday cooking classes at a local co-op. 10 women per session. No fancy cameras, no marketing team. Just hands chopping, hearts listening, and laughter bubbling over simmering pots. There was one woman, Annika, who hadn't cooked in 5 years after surviving a controlling marriage. She held the knife like it might hurt her back. By week 3, she was teaching others how to blend herbs for gut healing. That was healing, not just for her, but for me. I wrote every night again. Essays, poems, fragments of thoughts. I submitted a few to local publications. Some got rejected, but a few got published. Then came an offer from a small podcast. Would I be open to telling my story in my own words? The recording studio was bare, just a mic and a stool. But I sat down and spoke for 45 minutes without stopping. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just told the truth about loss, betrayal, erasure, and the long, slow road back to self. After the episode aired, my inbox filled with messages. Not of pity, of resonance. From women who had cooked unthanked meals. From daughters-in-law who lived in homes where they were never seen. From people rebuilding after silence. They called me brave. But it didn't feel like bravery. It felt like breathing again. By now, my apartment had changed. The rug was brighter. The windowsill had potted herbs. The walls were filled with my art, my words, my memories, not curated for anyone else's approval, for mine. I no longer checked Rachel's social media. I didn't need to. Her silence wasn't my victory. My voice was. I no longer flinched when people asked what I did for work. I told them I help women reconnect with their bodies through food, that I tell stories, that I believe in starting over. The biggest change was internal. I stopped apologizing, not in the big ways. I still said sorry when I bumped into someone, but in the subtle ways. I stopped shrinking my sentences. I stopped ending every opinion with, "But that's just me." I stopped folding my hands in my lap like I wasn't sure if I deserved the siat, Carla noticed. "You're finally sitting in your own body," she said during one session. That's where the healing lives. She was right. I wasn't fixed. I was whole. And that was more than enough. It happened on a rainy evening in early spring, nearly a year after I had walked out of that house. The invitation came in a plain envelope, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a card from Cheryl, elegant cursive. A request. "We're having a small family dinner for Gerald's birthday. It would mean something if you came." That was all. No apology, no explanations, just expectation, wrapped in politeness. I stared at the card for a long time, unsure whether I was feeling anger or something closer to amusement. I didn't reply immediately. I let it sit on my kitchen counter for 3 days, next to a vase of rosemary and sage I had harvested that week. I reread it every morning, waiting for the answer to reveal itself. And finally, on the 4th day, it did. I would go, but not for them, for me. I chose my outfit with intention, not a costume for acceptance, not armor for battle. Just something that felt like me. A long olive green dress, simple jewelry, my mother's vintage leather bag. Before I left, I glanced in the mirror. My eyes didn't dart away. My shoulders didn't slump. I looked like a woman who remembered her worth. The rain had stopped by the time I arrived. The house looked exactly the same, pristine, cold, curated. I walked up the path and knocked twice. The door opened, and for a moment, no one moved. Cheryl stood there in a navy dress, her smile hesitant. Gerald was visible in the background, sitting by the fireplace, thinner than I remembered. Rachel wasn't there yet. "Emily," Cheryl said, stepping aside. I entered the house without comment. The warmth of the air, the smell of roasting meat, the soft sound of classical music. It all felt engineered. Like the house itself was trying to perform civility. We sat around the dinner table, just 5 of us. Ethan was there, quiet and nervous, seated across from. Gerald gave a weak smile, raising his glass. "Thank you for coming," he said. I nodded. For the first half, our conversation stayed light. Weather, work, vague references to charity events. I didn't offer much. I listened. I watched them circle the discomfort like it didn't exist. Then Rachel arrived. She walked in late, of course, her hair freshly styled, her voice louder than necessary. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek like nothing had ever happened. I didn't flinch, but I didn't smile either. Dinner was served, plates passed, glasses clinked, and for a moment, I let it feel normal. I let them have their illusion. Until dessert arrived, a chocolate tart. My chest tightened. It was the same one I had made for Ethan that night, nearly a year ago. The one that had gone cold on the table while they all left for Rachel's celebration. I looked at it, then at Rachel, then back at Cheryl, who was watching me with something almost like anticipation, like she was waiting for me to break. Or maybe to be grateful. Instead, I placed my fork down, slowly, deliberately. "I have something to say," I said. The room quieted. All eyes turned to me. "I'm here tonight not because I've forgotten, or because I've forgiven, but because I believe in ending things cleanly, with truth." Rachel shifted in her seat. Cheryl set her glass down gently. For a long time, I continued. "I bent myself into someone I thought this family would accept. I cooked for you, served you, silenced myself so you could be more comfortable. I let my work be stolen, my name buried, my dignity eroded." Ethan opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished." He closed it. I was told, in words and in silences, that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't visible, that Rachel was the face and I was the labor behind it, that love was conditional and respect was optional. Rachel rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Emily. You're..." "Still stuck on that?" "Yes," I said, "because it happened. And unlike you, I don't move on by pretending nothing ever did." The room fell still again. Even Gerald, who had remained silent until now, looked at me differently, not angry, not even guilty. Just old. Like the weight of everything was finally catching up to him. "I don't need apologies tonight," I said. "I don't need validation. I just need you all to hear this. I'm not coming back. Not to this table. Not to this version of family. I didn't come here to reconnect. I came here to close the door. For good." I stood up. Rachel scoffed. "You're being dramatic." I looked at her. "No, I'm being clear. Something you've never had to be because everyone always translated for you." I reached into my bag and pulled out a single envelope. Inside was a letter, typed, signed, notarized. I placed it in front of Cheryl. "This is formal notice that I've trademarked all my work. You're no longer legally allowed to use any of it, ever." Cheryl's face paled. Then I turned to Gerald. "And you taught me that silence can be violence. You watched it all happen. You let your daughter manipulate and your wife enable. And you said nothing." He looked away. Then I turned to Ethan. "You lost me the day you decided comfort was more important than courage." He looked like he wanted to speak, but he didn't. Not this time. I walked to the door. Before leaving, I looked back one last time. I hope someday you learn the cost of staying silent. I hope it was worth it. Then I opened the door, stepped into the cool evening air, and pulled it shut behind me. It didn't slam, it didn't echo. It just closed, with finality. I walked down the driveway, the sound of my heels soft against the wet stone. The stars were out. The wind was gentle. And for the first time in a long time, I felt light. Because I had said everything I needed to say. Because the truth was no longer trapped inside me. Because closure didn't come from them. It came from me. The apartment I live in now isn't much, but it is mine. Second floor walk-up, creaky wood floors, sunlight that pours in through the kitchen window every morning like it's trying to say sorry for everything I've been through. There's a chipped ceramic pot on the sill with basil and thyme growing wild and messy, the way I like it. The walls are soft white. The shelves are lined with books, some old and water-stained, some brand new. There's no noise here, no backhanded comments hiding under smiles, just the hum of life being lived on my terms. Every morning I wake up early and brew coffee while the world outside still yawns. I play music, not to drown anything out, but to welcome the day in. I sit at my desk, the same one I bought secondhand during my hardest months, and I write. Sometimes essays, sometimes food journals, sometimes just a single sentence that carries more truth than 100 pages ever could. This is the rhythm I've created, the one I own. I no longer define myself by the people who failed to love me. That was the first real shift. For so long, I thought that if I just tried harder, gave more, softened my edges, they would finally open the door and let me in. But now I see there was never a door, just a wall, and I was never meant to break myself against it. I'm not bitter. I don't carry rage in my chest the way I used to. I carry distance. I carry wisdom. I carry boundaries that stretch wide and firm, like fences built not to keep love out, but to keep myself safe. Nourish from Within is now a fully registered business. I run online workshops, host monthly webinars, and partner with small organizations that focus on healing from emotional abuse through creative outlets. I work with women who, like me, lost their voices in homes that looked perfect on the outside. We write, we cook, we breathe together. We share stories not for sympathy but for connection. One woman, after attending 3 sessions, told me, "You gave me language for a pain I've been living in for 20 years. That stayed with me." Not long ago, I was invited to speak at a women's wellness conference. Not a massive event. No camera crews. Just a room full of people who had followed my work quietly for months. When I stepped onto that stage, I didn't think about Rachel or Cheryl or Gerald or even Ethan. I thought about my mother, about the way she used to hum when stirring soup, about her strong hands, her steady love. I thought about the time she told me, "You don't have to be loud to matter, but don't ever let someone confuse your silence with consent." I opened my speech with that quote, and I watched as heads nodded, as people scribbled it down, as tears quietly made their way down someone's cheek. That moment, that soft ripple of recognition, meant more to me than 1,000 apologies ever could. Ethan reached out once more, sent an email after seeing one of my interviews. He said he was sorry, that he had started therapy, that he understood now. I wished him well. I didn't respond. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't always about re-entry. Sometimes it's just about letting go of the rope between you and a sinking ship. I hope he finds peace. But I won't be the place he looks for it. Rachel's gone. Quiet. Her accounts are private. I don't check them anymore. I don't need to. Her silence no longer echoes inside me. It barely registers. I used to think her erasure of me would haunt me forever. Now I barely remember what her voice sounds like. Cheryl hasn't contacted me since that dinner. I suspect she knows there's nothing left to salvage. And Gerald, well, I heard he retired early. Health issues, they said. Or maybe he just got tired of the weight of pretending. None of that lives in my body anymore. I spend weekends teaching small in-person classes now. 10 people max. Everyone gets their own apron. We talk while we cook. About shame, about memory, about the way family wounds can sit in the stomach for years like stones. I teach people how to use food to feel again, not to numb, not to distract, but to anchor. Sometimes I wonder what my mother would think if she could see me now. Alone, but not lonely. Quiet, but no longer silenced. Building something not to prove my worth, but because I know I have it. She would be proud. I feel her in the way I tie my apron, in the way I taste before I serve, in the way I listen to someone without rushing to fix them. She taught me that healing isn't a destination. It's a daily decision. One I continue to make every time I stand in my kitchen, or write a sentence that once scared me, or decline a call from someone who used to make me question my own reality. This life isn't loud. It's not glamorous. But it's mine. Entirely, deeply mine. And in that, there's a kind of peace I never thought I'd know. One of my clients, a young woman recovering from a controlling relationship, asked me recently, "How did you get over it all?" I smiled and said, "I didn't get over it. I walked through it, slowly, honestly, and I never let it close behind me." Full circle isn't about returning to where you started. It's about arriving at a place where you no longer need the things that broke you. I'm home now, in myself, and I'm never leaving again. Have you ever poured your heart into something, a meal, a relationship, a dream, only to have it discarded like it never mattered? Have you ever stood in a room full of people who claimed to love you and felt completely unseen? If my story resonates with you, even in the smallest way, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not dramatic. You're not too sensitive. And you are not weak for needing kindness that was never given. So many of us are raised to endure, to stay quiet, to keep the peace even when it costs us our own. But there's power in naming the hurt. There's freedom in walking away from places that never saw you. And there's beauty in starting over, not for revenge, but for yourself. If you've ever been made to feel small, invisible, or erased, I want to hear from you. Comment below and share your story. Or just write, "I see you." Because sometimes that's enough to remind someone they exist. And if you believe in turning pain into purpose, subscribe to this channel. There's more to come. More stories. More healing. More truth. You deserve to be heard.